Hi everyone, nubkeks here and welcome back to Nub Raids. In today's video, I want to talk about, ask and answer the simple question, is the Hydra clan boss any good? As you guys know, I've made lots of videos on Hydra on the channel. Hydra's been out for over almost 2 months now. So for me, I feel like I've reached the point where I have enough of an understanding of Hydra to give you some really good answers, to point out the good and the bad for the Hydra in a pretty, hopefully, helpful and accurate way. And I also think it's interesting because although I really enjoy Hydra, actually, I really like the content, a lot of people really hate it. So yeah, let's dive into why, and then you can let me. I'm sure a lot of people will just let me know what they think without you're listening to the video, but please, if you do listen to the video, you can let me know what you think as well, and we can have a discussion. It could be incredible. We're responding to each other's points. Amazing. Wow, we have the technology in 2022. It's incredible. So I have a beautiful Word document drawn up here, which is with just a handful of bullet points, which sort of summarize how I feel. I want to talk about the pros first, right? Because I think this stuff doesn't get emphasized enough. Things that I actually really like about the Hydra. So first of all, I like that it's 3 weekly keys, right? It's not daily keys. It's not something I have to go in and do every day on that timer. I just have to do it once a week. And for me, I really like that. I feel like 3 keys as well is quite a nice amount where, especially if you're doing it pretty casually, you can come in and let's say you can 1 key normal and then throw 1 good key at hard and then kind of do a throwaway 2nd key in hard difficulty so that you can get the good chest reward or something like that. I think that's pretty doable. Yeah, I just like this structure. I think it's nice to have something different from having your clan boss keys or your doom tower keys that you need to use every day on top of the stuff you need to do every day. It's like I can do this during the week when I've got time. I like that. I also like that the starting heads and the affinities of all of the heads change every month, that we have a monthly rotation where basically it means, you know, it's a new challenge every month. Okay, different starting heads means different compositions are going to be viable, especially for lower difficulties, which is nice, where the heads often respawn the same head after you kill them. Quite nice for that, okay? Because you can build a more focused composition. And I like the affinities changing as well, because it means that, okay, a champion that's really strong this month might not be that good next month because the affinities have changed. So it means more champions kind of get their time in the sun. And that's something that I enjoy. I also like new heads coming in the future, that they can easily add in new heads. A good thing about this as well is that it could mean that the bad heads, and there are some really bad heads, we'll get to that, don't you worry, won't show up as often because there's going to be more heads. Maybe they could even cycle some in or out of certain rotations. I like this idea. I think it's a boss that can easily be added to in that modular fashion. I, again, also like 6 champions on a team, and I'll tie this point in as well, which also ties in with the affinity thing. It's a new place for champions to shine, right? By having 6 champions on a team, it opens up a lot more team building options. The fact that you need 3 different teams, so 18 champions total, again, it makes you sort of reassess your teams and the champions that you have and go, oh, well, I wasn't really using this champion anywhere before, but maybe they'd fit really well in this Hydra team with these other champions, and I can sort of move the pieces around and come up with good comps. That's something that I really like. You know, I'm one of the players that really enjoys, I actually quite like Tag Team Arena. I do kind of like it. And I actually really like Faction Wars as well. I know they're not the most popular content in the game. A lot of people seem to dislike them. But the thing I like having lots of champions, and I like using lots of champions to do different cool things together. I think Hydra achieves that. And for an endgame challenge, I think it's definitely an endgame challenge, right? It's very difficult content. It's tough to get through. It's cool to think up of different answers. Yeah, no one's going to come out and say Hydra's easy, that's for sure. So I like it. Not something that's going to be very accessible, unfortunately, for early game players. I mean, maybe an easy difficulty in the future might be nice. But for endgame, yeah, it's pretty great. So there are the pros. Let's get on to the cons. Let's complain. People like complaining. Oh, yeah. So for the cons, I mean, this stuff is, I think some of it is fairly obvious. The first one we want to talk about, the heavy RNG, the randomness to it in terms of heads respawning in particular. I think that kind of sucks. So for example, especially when I'm doing my keys on normal difficulty, right? And I'm thinking mostly here about beginning players who are earlier on in the game. You go, these are the 4 starting heads. I'll build my team to deal with them. But then you turn around and you go, oh, well, the head of decay just showed up and he's going to strip off all my debuffs and my team falls apart. I need to reset the key. if you guys remember in the first rotation, if the Head of Wrath showed up, we weren't bringing teams that had, decrease attack debuffs and things like that. We didn't have those sorts of teams out. So if the Head of Wrath showed up in rotation 1, it was like, well, I guess I'll just restart my key because it's not worth trying to fight against this head. So I think that's one of the worst aspects of it. I don't mind some of the randomness, like in terms of which champion gets eaten being random after the first one. I think that's pretty okay, actually. I don't really mind all that sort of stuff. Which head eats your champion? We'll talk about individual heads and how that can be too punishing, but I don't mind that too much outside of the individual heads themselves. So yeah, but some of the respawning stuff kind of sucks. So for example, perhaps if they had a system where you knew that the heads would appear in a certain order, so I could go, okay, well, if I kill the Head of Blight, the next head up is the Head of Mischief, right? So he will always come in next, so I can choose which head to target first, which head to kill first, because I know the next head that's going to come in, and they're all going to come in a set order. I can kind of plan around which Hydra head to kill off, because I know it's coming next. Something that was more set like that might be more enjoyable. Let me know what you think, though, about that one. I'm going to come back to the individual heads, because this is the big one. I do want to touch on this as well. I think there is a lack of champions that bring the needed buffs or debuffs to combat these Hydra heads. So one example, I think, is block buffs, right? Applying block buffs to stop the Hydra heads stealing your buffs or buffing themselves up with Poison Cloud or increase attack or whatever it is, spreading buffs around. That's a really good debuff for you to bring to stop it, but there's very few champions that can actually do it. Ugo, Umbral Enchantress are some of the better ones, but half of them are legendary even champions. I feel like we could do with a couple more accessible champions that bring this. Perfect Veil, another great example. If it weren't for the Tatura Rhymehide fusion that was at Christmas, right? It was a legendary fusion, High Elf, who can put Perfect Veil on your team. If it wasn't for that, there'd just be so few ways. There's no way that there's no way that I would have 3 keys that could deal with the true fears that are coming out. I just wouldn't be able to do it. We do have lots of damage dealers that put Perfect Veil on themselves, and I appreciate that, but we're a little bit lacking on Perfect Veil. I think likewise Hex, we just don't have very many good Hex champions that are viable against Hydra. I think actually the Hydra reward champion, Mithrala Lifebane, I think it is. I think she's going to be the best one, and that's going to change it up. But more champions with Hex that are actually good and that are actually good against Hydra would be nice. Most of them are really squishy damage dealers, which just aren't worth it at higher levels of Hydra. It just doesn't make any sense. So, and there's other examples too. I think, just the champions that bring answers to Hydra are hard to get. And yeah, I think that's a problem. I think they could look into, and I know other people have said this before as well, potentially with things like Doom Tower, that sort of thing, any of these areas where you can get these guaranteed epics. They don't need to be amazing epics, right? But it would be a great place to put in epics that give you answers to these problems. And instead of being Doom Tower being linear rewards, if you earned a currency and you could buy them from a Doom Tower bazaar, a Doom Tower shop, I think that'd be pretty cool. Because that's the problem with login rewards. That's the problem with Doom Tower, where it's a linear progression. Is that for a new player, it's like, yeah, if they added, let's say, a good champion with Perfect Veil and Hex, like a support champion, as the 7th reward in Doom Tower normal, it's like, yeah, that's nice. But that's 7 times 3 months. Like, that's years away. There's no way you're getting that. So, yeah. This is one thing I want to look at, guys. Decapitation effects. I think this is funny. They're so weak. In fact, before we look at this, if I ask you to tell me what the decapitation effects of the heads are, this is basically an effect that the head does, and they all have an individual one when you decapitate them, which is supposed to be awesome and really help your team. Could you tell me what they are? You probably can't. You probably can't tell me what they all are. And these are really underwhelming. So the Head of Blight, whenever you decapitate it, it puts damage on all heads under HP burn debuffs whenever it's decapitated. So it's like, this one is okay because HP burn is really good against it. You'll probably have a HP burner with you. But again, it's not really all that exciting. I think this is a very average one. The Head of Torment, this one again is very average. When you decapitate it, it removes all fear and true fear debuffs from all enemy champions. So I think that's nice because you're trying to deal with the fears and true fears he puts out. And then puts Perfect Veil for 2 turns on 2 random enemy champions. Like, this to me is just super weird. Perfect Veil on 2 random champions. Like, why do we care? The reason you're bringing Perfect Veil is so that when you attack him, you don't get true fear, but you've just decapitated him. What's the point of this? It's really random. It doesn't really do any. It gives you some damage reduction, but on 2 random champions, it's so random. I feel very underwhelming. Next up, Head of Mischief. This one I think is actually really good. When you decapitate the Head of Mischief, it fully depletes the turn meters of all Hydra heads. That one is actually really good. And I've noticed this one in my runs. I play around this sometimes in my runs. This one is great. So thumbs up on this one for sure. Head of Wrath. This one makes me laugh. You decapitate him. He does damage to all heads whenever he's decapitated. If you decapitate him under the Vengeance buff, the damage inflicted increases, and there's, wait for it, a 25% chance of putting Leech on all heads for 2 turns. That's right, guys. If you put in the work to decapitate him while he's under his Vengeance buff, if you time it just right, there's a 25% chance to put out leeches. What is that? Terrible. Really bad. And the damage he puts out as well is really weak. I have a feeling that he actually weak hits as well. You might be able to confirm that. I think he weak hits with this. Not 100% sure, but it certainly doesn't hit very hard. You really don't notice it very much. Very underwhelming. And if he weak hits, like certainly this rotation, he's negative affinity to most heads, so it's really bad. Then Head of Decay. This one is also pretty good. When he's decapitated, heals enemy champions by 30% their max HP. That's a good chunky noticeable heal. And then he restores 50% of the max HP of any enemy champions whose max HP has been decreased. So he sort of halves his max HP decrease, which is nice. But I wouldn't mind it being a bit better. And then finally, the Head of Suffering. Shield buff on all enemy champions for 2 turns, equal to 30% their max HP whenever he's decapitated. I mean, it takes so long to kill this guy because he's so tanky. The shield is okay for 2 turns. It's kind of short. It's kind of nice, but it's also not great. Like, it's just not that good. And for me, these things are really underwhelming. So what I actually went through, I actually did up a list of this is what they actually do. But I said, okay, here's some ideas to make it more badass. So let's say the Head of Blight, right? Instead of doing damage to all heads under HP burn, he's all about poisoning your team. How about you decapitate him? He does a full team cleanse, removes all the debuffs, all the poisons he's put out in your team, all of that stuff. He removes it all. And then how about, instead of this 25% chance to put Leech on Hydra heads when decapitated under Vengeance, none of that nonsense. How about this? Just puts Leech on all of the Hydra heads for 5 turns. 100% chance, all the heads, 5 turns. Basically says, okay, you got through this guy. He's been putting out tons of damage on your team, melting you down with all those poisons. He does lots of damage. We'll remove all of those debuffs and any debuffs on your team. They're all gone. And now there's Leech on these Hydra heads. You got a whole bunch of turns to actually heal up and to recover from the Blight head. Head of Torment. I thought this could be kind of fun. Okay, so remove the fears from your team so you don't have to deal with it. But forget about this 2 random perfect veils. How about this? Put true fear on the other Hydra heads. How good would that be, right? You go in, you kill off the Torment head, and then he true fears the other heads so they could miss their turn and put their abilities on cooldown. That would be so powerful and give you a really good reason to kill this guy. Mischief, I think, is fine with the fully deplete turn meter. Suggested spellings. British English. I know. For Wrath, I like the idea that Wrath is the big damage dealer and he does big damage when you kill him. How about this? When you kill the Wrath head, he does 10% max HP damage to all the other Hydra heads. Maybe 15, maybe even 20%. I'd say 20% would be too strong. How about 15% if he's under Vengeance? I mean, maybe this could be 7.5 and then it doubles to 15 if he's under Vengeance. So there's a good reason to kill him under Vengeance. It's big chunky damage that you notice. It would, for example, be enough damage. It should be tuned to break a champion out of being devoured, to break them free. It should do that. So it gives you another option. Someone's been devoured. Oh, if I kill off the Wrath head because he's low, he'll nuke the enemy Hydra and actually break that person free. Great, let's do it. I think Decay isn't bad, 30% heal. I think restoring all the max HP decrease would be nice, so just all the max HP reduction you have goes away, and then he heals you. I think that would be a little bit better. And then for Suffering, I was thinking, I've obviously in my videos shown you how good Geomancer is. Imagine he brought in a mini Geomancer thing, where he'd put Pain Link on Hydra for 3 turns, so basically all the Hydra heads would take any damage that goes onto your team would be reflected onto them at 100% value for like 3 turns. Right, so turning the Head of Wrath, turning the Head of Blight, these high damage heads, into damage batteries against Head of Suffering, basically giving you a way to access a Geomancer style damage reflection, without needing to bring Geomancer, right? I think that would be a cool way to give you more viable ways to fight the Hydra and get really good damage without needing to nerf Geomancer or introduce more champions like Geomancer. and make, again, the suffering head a bit more interesting. So that was, I don't know. There's lots of things you could do with this, but I think just make it more cool. I feel like for the most part, you don't even notice these effects when they happen. They're so underwhelming. I think make them noticeable, make single target damage dealers, makes actually picking off the head of your choice much more impactful. You can play around it, adds more strategy, adds more fun. If you want people to manual this fight, I think it's a great way to make it more rewarding and fun. Now I want to talk about the big topic, individual heads being too punishing, right? I think the way to look at these heads, guys, the way to look at these heads is how can you counter them? That's the big question. Can you counter a head? And if you can counter a head, I think that actually makes it more fun, because you can design a strategy. You can design a team to beat it. You go in and you can see that strategy work. You can see it pay off and it feels good. So for example, in rotation 1, I actually thought Head of Wrath was terrible, because Head of Wrath would show up. He wasn't in the starting lineup, but when he showed up, he just like one-shot your team. You had to reset your key. I was thinking, man, this Head of Wrath, it seems like you can't counter him. He's terrible. Now, though, having played Rotation 2, I can tell you for 100% fact, he's probably actually my favorite head. I think he's probably the best designed head overall. And actually, the problem wasn't the Head of Wrath. The problem was another head, which is just awful. But Head of Wrath is actually okay. So we look at him, right? So he's got an AoE attack that puts decreased attack out. Not a huge deal. You can cleanse that off. You can remove it. But he's hitting hard, right? This Vengeance buff builds up his Vengeance counter. He does a massive hit on your head. He puts these buffs on himself. Pretty scary stuff. So but we know there's multiple ways to counter this, right? It can bring increased defense, strengthen. I can bring shielding. I can bring healing to heal it back up. I can put decreased attack on him so he doesn't hit me so hard. I can put block buffs on him so he can't get his increased attack buff, which he gets, can't get his increased attack buff. I can put block buffs so he doesn't get these buffs. I could use block damage to block the Vengeance hit. I can use cleansers or block debuffs to stop provoke coming out. Okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff I can do to counter the Head of Wrath, and you can really see it for yourself. Like if I go in with no buffs or debuffs that are good against him, we're kind of screwed. But if I go up against his Head of Wrath and I'm blocking his buffs, I decrease his attack, I'm boosting my team's defenses, suddenly he's not that bad at all. And I actually think it makes him very fun, where, he's always a danger, but he's a danger that you can manage. So I think that makes him very fun. I'll come back to Mischief. That's one people probably hate. I think Head of Blight is also actually pretty reasonable. So he's putting out all of these AoE debuffs. He does a lot of damage, but we know there's multiple ways to deal with this. You can potentially heal through it. You can bring a cleanser to remove debuffs. You can bring in block debuffs to just block these things being applied. That's not bad. Poison Cloud is obviously a huge pain in the ass, but you can stop it from happening if you have AoE HP burnout. You can still hit through the Poison Cloud. I think it would be kind of nice if maybe HP burn stopped Poison Cloud being put on. That would probably be a little bit better, but that would be a nice improvement. But yeah, just to point that out, you can put block buffs out to stop this going on. So you've got a couple of options there. I think the annoying thing is, again, with the worst head in the game, if he gets Poison Cloud out and you can't stop that going out, you can be just left there screwed. I think that Mordecai and Geomancer can put HP burn on to someone who has Poison Cloud active, but other than that, you're just sort of screwed, and that does suck. So I think if HP burn stopped this going on, that would be good. Or if maybe HP burn could apply through a Poison Cloud, that would be good. It would still apply anyway as normal. That would be nice. But yeah, I think there's ways to counter him. He's kind of a pain in the ass, but it's not that bad, right? You bring in your cleansing, block debuffs, you bring in HP burn or block buffs, and you've got ways around it. Head of Torment is a little bit of a problem, I think, right? So whenever he's attacked by enemies not under Perfect Veil, he puts True Fear on them for one turn. I think this is, again, a big issue with lack of champions that can actually deal with this. Inquisitor Shamael is obviously incredible. Like Duchess is obviously incredible. Rector Drath. But there's just not many champions that put Perfect Veil on your team. So you're often constantly getting True Feared, and it's a real pain in the butt. So this kind of is a bit of a lack of champion problem. I also think maybe it's a bit harsh. It could be just a normal fear, for example. True Fear makes your abilities go on cooldown, so it really ruins your team. I think if this was just a normal fear, I think that would be a lot more forgiving. I think that would be better. If this was just normal Veil, again, there'd be more options. So I think that might be a nice change to make it more forgiving. You know, maybe Curse Storm could come in on like a 5-turn cooldown and put True Fear on everyone not under Veil, right? So that you still have to, not under Perfect Veil even, you'd still have to deal with it, but on like a longer cooldown. So you could plan around it a bit more with like a cleanser or something like that. It wouldn't be so punishing. I think his A1 is okay, actually. Maybe a little bit not punishing enough in that sense. I think it's his passive that does most of it. And that could do with some rebalancing, for sure. Head of Mischief. I think a lot of people will probably pick Head of Mischief as their most hated head. Because he's super fast. He attacks, he steals half your turn meter. He steals all of your buffs. And he's just going so fast. And then because he redirects enemy attacks if he doesn't have Hex on him. This guy's a nightmare. And then he puts your buffs on the other heads. This guy is a nightmare. But again, I don't think he's the worst head. I think he's bad, but we look at ways to counter him. And I think there are ways to counter him. We can put block buffs on. We put block buffs, he can't steal buffs. That's okay. We can decrease his speed so he's not quite so quick. I think, again, one issue here, Hex should be a really good counter, but the Hex champions are just not very good. So that's a problem. But when Hex, if the champions that we get, actual good champions with Hex, that gives us another way to counter him. So that's not too bad either. We can use AoE block buffs to stop the buff spread. We can remove buffs to stop the buff spread. We've got ways to counter it. That's okay. Decrease accuracy as well can be pretty good. If we have a bit of resistance, we can put decrease accuracy out, and that can stop him stealing buffs. That can stop him stealing turn meter. That gives us some ways to play around it. Is he still a pain? Yes, he is, because of this redirect thing, but we've got ways to counter it. I think the reason and the thing that makes him so bad is the big problem head. It's not the Head of Wrath, the Head of Decay. This head is the thing that makes Hydra terrible. Right? It's the thing that makes the Hydra absolutely terrible. Let's talk about the two things I think that are fine with him first. I actually think his passive is pretty cool. Whenever an enemy champion is healed, it decreases their max HP. I actually think that's pretty cool. That, you know, it fits with the theme of Decay as well. Like, you leave this guy up and he's going to be wearing your max HP down, making you more vulnerable to being nuked. I think that's actually a cool passive. I think it's good. Again, I would prefer if the Decapitation fully reverted this. But I think it's okay. Difficult to play around it, mind you. You know, like, just don't heal. That's not really practical. But it does sort of, you know, shielding is a way to get around it. Block damage, decreasing attacks so you don't have to heal as much. Kind of. You can kind of play around it, but at least it's thematic. At least it fits with the theme of it, is what I will say. I think one issue is the lack of champions that put out good shields. I mean, I'd say the best shielding champion is Brogni, and Brogni shields heal you whenever you take damage, so that doesn't really work, right? It doesn't really work. But if the Decapitation effect fully fixed it, I think they'd be totally good. I also think his A1 is fine. Attacks the enemy at the lowest HP and puts heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. I think, again, that's actually pretty interesting. It makes bringing a cleanser important, or blocking debuffs. It makes that stuff important so that you can actually heal this person that's low on health. I think that's fair. I think that fits. In fact, it can, I guess technically could be good. It stops you from lowering their max HP sometimes, but I think that's fair enough. But these two abilities are the worst freaking abilities in the game. Oh my god. First of all, Speed of Decay. How do you counter this, right? Removes all debuffs from all heads, then fills the turn meters of all heads by 30%. How do you counter that? What do you do? What do you do? There's nothing that you can do. What this does, right? What Speed of Decay does is it stops you from countering what the it stops you from countering the other heads, right? It stops you. This is where it becomes awful. Head of Mischief comes in. Really nasty effects on Head of Mischief, but we've countered them, right? We put decreased speed. We've put block buffs. Okay, we've decreased his accuracy. We've done a whole bunch of stuff to lock him down. This guy comes in, goes, all your debuffs are gone. They're all gone. Have some turn meter. Head of Mischief then goes in with his turn meter boost. And now he doesn't have decreased accuracy. He attacks, he steals, he eats a champion. And you go, oh, he just ate one of my champion. Hex is gone. Hex has been purged. Whatever. Now he's stolen my buffs as well. My block buffs is gone. Now he can buff spread and put all my buffs on the enemy Hydras. And there's nothing I can do about it because there's no way. There's no way to stop Speed of Decay. There is nothing you can do. He is going to come out and he is going to do this. There's nothing you can do, right? All of your debuffs are gone. Head of Wrath comes in. Our friend, the Head of Wrath, again, I think really good. You can counter him in smart ways. It just goes, okay, your block buffs is gone. Your decrease attack is gone. Sorry about that. Head of Wrath, do your thing. Head of Blight comes in, and Head of Decay goes, okay, right, all your debuffs are gone. Poison Cloud is out now because block buffs is gone. HP Burn is gone. Now all of your hits are weak hits on all the Hydra heads for 2 turns. Oh yeah, one of them just ate one of your champions. Well, I guess tough shit. Tough shit. Oh, they've got turn meters, so they're going to get eaten faster as well. There's nothing you can do to counter. Like, there's literally no counter. This just removes counters, which makes it awful. Rotten Ward, I think, is also kind of similar. It's not as bad, but it's still pretty bad, where it removes all debuffs from the head with the lowest HP and then puts this life barrier on them for 4 turns. You can't remove it, you can't steal it. Again, the thing that makes this so annoying is that, again, in combination with the Head of Mischief, which is super fast, the Head of Mischief eats a champion and then he puts Rotten Ward on them and all of their debuffs are gone. So you've got this super fast head that you have to re-debuff. You have to try to re-hit without Hex debuff, and it's just a pain in the ass. Right, it's a huge pain in the ass. The funny thing about this as well, I feel like this is 2 heads, guys. Tell me if I'm wrong here. Is this not 2 different heads that have been combined into one? Because I think Almighty Decay, yeah, that fits with Decay. And Agonizing Jaws, you know, stopping you healing, you're slowly getting worn down. That fits with Decay. What does Speed of Decay even mean? What does that even mean? What does that even mean? Speed of Decay removes all debuffs and fills their turn meter. That has nothing to do with Decay at all. Decay is like I put stuff in the compost bin out the back or the compost heap and it slowly breaks down, right? It's slowly breaking down. Full cleanse and turn meter boost has nothing to do with that. Nothing at all. Absolutely no, it just absolutely makes no sense. It feels like this was like, you know, there's supposed to be some like chronomancer head or something like that, some sort of time head. It's all about controlling time that could do this. And I think that could be okay. That could be kind of cool. Like a time head comes in, if you don't kill him within 3 turns, he does this, right? Something like that could be kind of cool. But yeah, this just makes it makes no sense. And again, like Rotten Ward, healing and stuff, it just doesn't fit with Decay. This one's not so bad. I guess the idea is that he reverses the decay that you've done to the heads. But like Speed of Decay boosting turn meter, it just doesn't make any sense at all. My favorite thing about this though, so you can read through this stuff, right? You can read through this and it gives you strategy tips. It tells you how to counter them. So like Head of Mischief, okay, Hex debuff can counter them. Block buffs can counter them. The Head of Wrath, okay, we can go in here, right? Go in against Head of Wrath. We can increase defense, strengthen, shield, use unkillable, use block damage, right? There's a few different ways to counter Head of Wrath. You get to Head of Decay. And it explains what it does. Head of Decay. I think this is hilarious. It's like the worst roommate ever, right? He's very annoying, doesn't have a good means of defending itself, but it is actually one of the tankiest heads, so it's hard to kill. It's very difficult to go completely without healing, so you're better off decapitating that Head of Decay as soon as possible. And that's it. It's very annoying. Just kill it as soon as possible. It's the worst roommate ever. It's like, I don't know how to deal with it, bro. Just kill it. I don't know. And no, it's like, why is there a huge shit blocking the toilet? I don't know, bro. Just clean it. Like, I don't know. Just clean it, bro. Like, just kill it. Forehead is their tip. That's all. That's it. Like, that's all they have. That's it. It's unbelievable. So the Head of Decay is the problem, right? And the Head of Decay, he's coming in, and like I said, he's the one that makes these other heads bad. If he was not in there, it's not so bad because there are ways that you can build around it, that you can counter it, that you can deal with it. But when he comes in and he removes all your debuffs, the Head of Mischief especially becomes a monster and just not fun to play around. So I think that's the biggest thing they need to change. They need to change. It needs to happen. Fix him. I'd say split him up into 2 heads. Put in some sort of timey-wimey head that his abilities start on cooldown, and if you don't kill him quick enough, he is going to do stuff, but maybe he's vulnerable to like cooldown increasing effects. So things like Basher or whatever, Ramantu or Warlord or something, you'd have some ways to counter this speed head and he'd be squishy. And it's like kill him fast before he gets you. And then have Head of Decay, like whatever, increase the duration of your debuffs and activate them. So all your poisons like increase a turn and then explode. Speed of Decay, increase your debuffs and then make them go off. You know, it's like, oh, we've gone one step further down the dying to poison route. That fits with Decay. There's some ways to deal with it. But yeah, there you go, guys. That's what I think of Hydra. That's what I think of Hydra. Let me know what you think. Been a bit of a long video, but hopefully an interesting one. Like I said, I feel like for the most part, it's actually pretty good. And actually, some of these worst heads, some of that are the most annoying, Some of the problems will be fixed just as more champions come into the game, especially if they're accessible champions. And I hope Plarium does more on that front. And then I think if the Head of Decay gets fixed, I think that does a huge amount of work to make the Head of Blight, to make especially the Head of Mischief much less annoying. I think even if they didn't change Head of Mischief at all, it wouldn't be that bad if Head of Blight wasn't in there. Because as it is right now, if Head of Mischief and Blight come in together, and it's like you can't keep debuffs on and they keep getting turn meter boost, it's like the Head of Mischief is going to eat one of your champions and they will devour them, and there's nothing you can do. It's just restart your run. There's no way to play around it because you can't counteract the Speed of Decay move. There's no counter. There's no way to deal with it, and that sucks. Guys, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.